Great. I see some familiar names and faces on the chat, and I'm happy to see some new names too. Um, while we're waiting, Hannah, I know that you joined us for a lobby day last year, and it was your first experience doing legislative work. So, do you want to share kind of what that was like for you?
Yes, it was intimidating initially. Emily's a pro, so it made me feel better. But I think it's just one of those things like you go into it, you have like this idea of politicians, and then you sit down and you have this conversation, and you realize like these are real people and they have real jobs, and this is they just feel like the need to act on behalf of their community, and so it's really nice just realizing that they're real people and connecting with them on a deeper level. So like I said, initially intimidating, but like once you go in and you sit down with these people and you address like your concerns and those issues, whether Republican or Democrat, it's a really rewarding experience, and I'm really fortunate that Emily gave me that opportunity. So I enjoyed it and highly encourage anybody else to do it. I'm excited to go back.
Yeah, Hannah is organizing another lobby day with us in April. So if you were a part of that last year, if you weren't a part of that, either way, it is so much more impactful for other constituents to come and join me. They know me, they know what I'm going to say before I ever walk in the room. And so the biggest impact is when we can bring folks like you all to Raleigh with us to talk to these people directly. Okay, so it's 6:04. I say we go ahead and get started. Anita, you're recording this, and those of you who maybe didn't see her message in the chat, it's only recording the audio and slides. So your names and chat and any detail that you've put in here will not be a part of the recording. Also, just some housekeeping. Try to keep yourself on mute so we don't have a bunch of background noise. But I'm going to go through some slides, and then I really want this to be interactive. So I've got a lot of time for questions and conversation at the end. So I encourage you to think of questions and conversation as we go through. Okay, so I'm Emily Sutton. I'm your Haw River Keeper at Haw River Assembly. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for our legislative outlook for 2024. Most of you on this call know very well who we are, but we are the Riverkeeper group for the entire Haw River watershed, which encompasses 8 counties. It's all the way from up, I've got a map in front of me right here. It's actually perfect. The Haw River starts in a little crayfish hole in the Forsyth County and goes, the watershed is Rockingham, Guilford, a tiny bit of Caswell County, all of Alamance, much of Orange County, Chatham, a little bit of Wake, and a little bit of Durham. So it's a big area. It's a lot to cover. So we work to protect not only the Haw, but all of those streams and the communities that depend on it. Okay, so what I'm hoping to accomplish tonight is to give you an overview of what we expect for 2024, what you can expect from us as your Riverkeeper advocate, and what you can do to help us. So first and foremost, I want to share some expectations and ground rules. We are a 501c3, so for those of you who aren't in nonprofit world, that means that we do not engage in electioneering. I will never tell you who to support or oppose. That is against the rules. Or take any partisan stance or tell you how to vote or who to vote for. Some other organizations can do that. They have 501c4 status. So we often will send people links to League of Conservation Voters. They do a ranking for a lot of these based on environmental decisions. And there's a lot of resources out there that you can look up how your candidate has voted on past issues that you're concerned about. But you won't get that from us. That is against the law. So just wanted to set that tone. We protect the watershed, but we don't do this on our own. So we're a community partner in a larger coalition of North Carolina advocates. North Carolina is home to 15 water keepers. It's more than any other state. So we're very fortunate to have such a robust community of river keepers and water keepers throughout the state. And we're all working towards better policies. But it's not just river keepers, it's Conservation Network, it's Southern Environmental Law Center, it's all of these organizations that are fighting the good fight against all odds in North Carolina to move the needle towards stronger environmental protections. So I'm also a registered lobbyist. When I tell people that, sometimes they give me very dirty looks. When people hear registered lobbyist, they assume you're a bad guy. But there's not a whole lot of environmental lobbyists out there. So I understand that assumption. In North Carolina, we are a small but mighty and persistent group. For me, what that means is that I work directly with communities that are impacted. I connect constituents with their representatives, and I also introduce bills and support and oppose bills. So I'm working directly with the representative to say, this bill will cause X, Y, and Z for communities that you represent. And lastly, and maybe most importantly for tonight, we are nonpartisan. So water quality is nonpartisan. We believe in and support policies that protect clean water, but we do not support or oppose specific candidates. So with that said, this is not a place to throw in your political views to make it kind of a nonpartisan conversation. We're going to learn about the process and the ways that these processes impact our watershed and our community. Okay, so please behave. Okay, what to expect in 2024. This is a really big election year, and not just for the presidential seat. North Carolina primary elections start on March 5th, and the North Carolina general elections are November 5th. So a lot of local and state level elections are happening, and these are the elections that are so incredibly important. These are the representatives that create laws and ordinances that impact your life in the most meaningful and most direct way. So we're going to make sure that you have all the resources you need to stay informed and make the best decision. The legislative short session also happens this year. So what that means is that last year we were in a year that had the long session. So that was a period where we could introduce bills, we could talk to representatives about policies that we wanted to see, but this is a very short session. So it starts in April and it will end in July. So no new bills can be introduced in the short session. So we'll see a continuation of a lot of bills that were introduced in 2023, but maybe didn't make it over the finish line. So in short, the life of a bill is not just on Capitol Hill, but the life of a bill, we introduce policy and recommend solutions, and then there's a bunch of whereas clauses that says what the problem is, but then it has to go to a committee that best reflects whatever that is about. So for us, most of the bills that we work on are the environmental committee. If it passes the environmental committee, then it will go to the rules review committee. That's where a lot of bills die. If it makes it past a committee and has died in rules review committee, those are the bills that we can continue to push this year. That's a lot of really good bills and a lot of really bad ones too. So there's still going to be a lot of action. And then just to continue that kind of metaphor, if it passes the rules review committee, then it goes to a full vote. So a lot of bills never actually make it to the floor for a full vote. Okay, so then this is also a time to prepare for next year, 2025, for that long session. So we're going to be researching policy and new legislation, and then most importantly, finding out who the champions are in the House and the Senate. So in order for us to get any movement on bills, we really have to have a Republican and a Democrat to support that. So we show that it's bipartisan. That's how we get bills across the finish line. Susie, go ahead.
Yeah, just a quick question. Who are on these committees? You say they need to get through these committees. Who are these people?
That's a great question. So the Speaker of the House and the Speaker of the Senate, they nominate who are on committees. And so a lot of the time it is members of both parties that show an interest in those kinds of things. They may request to be on certain committees, but the leadership of the House and Senate identifies who's on those committees, and most importantly, who the chair of those committees are. The chair of all these committees decide what votes go onto the floor to be voted on to begin with. So, for example, if the chair of the Environmental Committee doesn't want a bill to move forward, that bill's never going to get heard. And the same thing with the Rules Review Commission, same thing with the Speaker in the House for the full Senate and Representative. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but it seems like they could potentially become the head of a committee because they don't want anything to pass. Do you know what I'm saying? So it does become partisan.
Yeah, that's right. And so what we have seen in the past is that some of the champions that we've had for environmental issues will not vote the way that we want them to or the way that we expect them to, because they've already made a deal with leadership to get a chair position of another committee. And so there's a lot of behind the scenes wheeling and dealing that goes on. So you are right. That is accurate. So in preparing for the long session, we have to figure out who those champions are, and most importantly, make relationships with the chairs of those committees, regardless of what their stance is. And so figuring out what they care about and how we communicate our concerns in a way that will grab their attention. Okay, so here is who is on the 2024 ballot. Like I said, not just federal elections this year. The agricultural commissioner is one that nobody really pays that much attention to, but oh my gosh, they have such an amazing amount of power because it has been Commissioner Troxler for many, many years. And this is where a lot of our hangups for any environmental protections come into play. We're going to talk about this bill in just a minute, but this year, for example, 2023, one of the worst things that happened for water quality was the loss of protections of wetlands. That came through in an omnibus bill that was called the North Carolina Farm Act. So if the agricultural commissioner supports or doesn't support something, it's really hard to get any kind of environmental protections passed. So that is a really important one to pay attention to figure out who the candidates are, what their values are, and how they've voted for things in the past, whether they've been a county commissioner or a soil and water commissioner at the local level. These are things to look into. State senator and state representative, those are also really important. Those are the people that impact you in a very direct way at the state level. Those are the people that I work with. And I will bring you to meet when you come to a lobby day with me. I see Donna's hand. I'm going to finish this slide and then I'll get you. Lastly is county commissioners. There are so many examples of projects that we've stopped or successes that we've had or losses that we've had that were completely at the hands of county commissioners. One of those examples is our win with the MVP Southgate back in 2017, 2018 maybe. We got the Alamance County commissioners to unanimously support a resolution to oppose the MVP Southgate. That was huge. That meant that we could take this resolution to FERC to North Carolina DEQ, to all of those permitting agencies, and they have a huge voice in that fight. We've also lost some things at the county level. So county commissioners are incredibly important, and they have a lot of power in what happens in your community, especially when it comes to development or projects. Okay, Donna, you had a question.
Just want to let you know I'm here. I had a difficult time getting on. I'm currently a soil and water conservation district supervisor with Alamance County.
Yeah.
And I'm running for state senate, district 25. So I'm here, I'm listening, and I have obviously some concerns about environmental issues here in Alamance County and have taken the lead in some of them.
Yes, and Donna, I met you at the Alamance County, the discussion on the missile plant, the Tar Heel missile plant. So thank you for being here. Okay, so on to the next slide. What happened in 2023? That is a sad tale, but I'm just gonna give it to you straight. So there were a lot of very, very bad bills in 2023. And a big reason for that is actually something that Susie mentioned earlier. So there was Tim Moore, the Speaker of the House for North Carolina, he announced his resignation. So he will no longer be the Speaker of the House in 2024. That means that everyone is vying for that slot. And in order to do that, you have to raise a lot of money. Well, home builders are huge. Home Builders Association is a lobbying entity that gives a lot of money to candidates in North Carolina and to representatives in North Carolina. So no one wanted to do anything that upset the home builders because that hits their pockets. So home builders took their policy and ran with it. Their recommendations, a lot of them became law. There were a lot of examples where representatives on the floor would say talking points that were written by home builders. And so we anticipate there being a little bit of a backlash to this, and 2024 may be clawing back some of those environmental losses. But one of those was the wetland loss that I mentioned before. North Carolina no longer has special laws to protect our wetlands. Our laws for what deems a body of water that's protected by the Clean Water Act, that reflects the federal law, which also just lost a lot of protections this year. North Carolina has always had separate statewide protections for wetlands, and that was revoked this year. Another terrible bill was the Regulatory Reform Act. Those of y'all who are familiar with us and follow along on our eye contact, first of all, thank you. Second of all, this was a bill that made it very easy for 401 permits to be passed through. So 401 is the permit that is required for any construction project that crosses a stream. So for us, that was specifically written for the MVP Southgate. The people that wrote that bill, 2 representatives in Alamance County, they told us directly that they worked with Mountain Valley Pipeline Southgate representatives to get that language in the bill. So that was a really huge loss for us. Plastics. There was also another bill this year that was a preemption law, which meant that local governments can no longer have their own bills, their own ordinances to reduce plastic use. And so that came from our work with Duke Law and Policy Clinic and a group from Asheville. We made a lot of progress to make a plastic bag ban or a plastic bag fee, which would have dramatically reduced the amount of plastic in our waterways. And the Retail Merchants Association came in and lobbied against it, and the North Carolina General Assembly put forward a bill that said that no local governments could have plastics reduction bills. So those were the worst. Some bills were less terrible because of our work, though. One of those bills was a bill that was started a buyback program for fire departments to dispose of AFFF PFAS-containing firefighting foam. That bill would also purchase a training facility in Stanley County to conduct exposure studies on firefighters and their families who would continue to use the foams that were containing PFAS. That language changed because of our advocacy and because of our organizing, because of community members coming to talk to their representatives. PFAS is no longer required to be used at that training facility. It will be a facility to research alternatives to PFAS foams, which was a huge win. And lastly, so many great bills were introduced. So this is what I mentioned earlier, that in 2024, in that short session, we can still work with a lot of those bills that were already introduced and just didn't make it over the finish line. And so last year, there were 7 PFAS bills that were introduced and only one of them passed. I can go into all the details of that right now, but I'll just send a link so I don't go too much into it. But the short version is that it would ban, some of the bills would ban the manufacture, use, and distribution of PFAS and require limitations in both surface water and drinking water. Okay. So these are our policy priorities for our organization for this coming year and as we look forward to 2025, as we're building those new bills. One of those are the PFAS bills that I just mentioned. There's a lot to work with out there, so we're going to keep pushing for those protections. Another is dam removal. We introduced a bill last year working with representatives in Alamance County to remove hazardous dams. The photo in this slide is the Altamaha Ossipee Dam, and that dam is filled with leaks. It's been listed as a hazard for the Alamance County Emergency Management. And if you've ever seen it, it is spewing water out of it. So we're really concerned about that one and the safety for paddlers downstream. The bill that we introduced would support funding for removal of 4 hazardous dams on the Haw River and support trail and paddle access improvement. Another policy is stormwater. Right now, existing developments, if it's being redeveloped, it doesn't require new stormwater designs. And so I live in Durham. Downtown Durham has no raw land to develop. So that means that everything's being redeveloped. Big buildings are being torn down and that same footprint is being built as something else. Well, that new development in that redeveloped place doesn't have stormwater requirements. And this is a huge loophole that we're trying to close. This next part kind of ties into the climate resiliency, but we're really pushing for all of these stormwater devices to be able to withstand a 100-year storm. So what that means is a storm that happens hypothetically once every 100 times within a year. So right now, a lot of storm basins are built for the 1 in 10-year storm, and that's just not enough. Climate change has made our rainstorms more dramatic and stronger, and we have to plan for that climate resiliency. I'm not going to go into our 10 policy recommendations that we've made to North Carolina legislators, but I will send everyone who registered a follow-up link. And on our website, if you go to hawriver.org, we have a program on the programs tab. It's called the Climate Action Campaign. And we wrote letters to North Carolina legislators and local government representatives about ordinances and bills and policies that they can enact right now to make North Carolina more climate resilient. And lastly, our plastics work, we want to repeal that preemption law. That is the biggest barrier for us right now. And then we can also tackle bottle bills, which has been a really successful vehicle in other states to minimize plastic waste. Okay, so what you can expect from us to support you. We are going to continue to put out resources, whether that's on our social media or our From the River blog post or our weekly e-newsletter. So we're giving you information about the issues that you care about. With that information will come questions for candidates who hope to represent you. So we also have a training called an advocacy training. That is, there's a presentation online about that and a lot of other resources there, but it will really walk you through when and how to ask those questions. You have to remember, I mean, one thing that Hannah mentioned earlier is that these people who represent you at the state level, they have other jobs. They're not, you know, an expert on policy. I know that it seems very daunting and intimidating to reach out to these people, but they aren't the expert on a lot of these issues, and they need to hear from you and from, you know, what matters to the people they hope to represent. We'll also send you reminders for upcoming elections and how to find all of these resources. Okay, so here are things that you can do right now to help us move these policies forward. Most importantly, show up. You are the eyes and the ears of our river. So we are a small staff. We've got a big watershed. So show up to trainings, show up to lobby days, show up to volunteer events. If you're not a member, become a member. Also, you can document issues that you're seeing in the basin. So next week, actually, we have a Muddy Water Watch training that's virtual, where we train people to identify sediment pollution. So there's a lot of information and ways that you can engage. Next, speak up. So whether that's in your friend group, at your potluck, or in your book club, be that person in your circle of friends that is always talking about the river, whether that's policy stuff or just how beautiful it is. Because we protect what we love, and we only love what we know. So tell people about this river that belongs to them too. We want people to engage with this place. And we can't do better until we know better. And so informing the people that are in your circles who trust you the most, to let them know how they can engage on this work. Lastly, communicate. So if you are, also connect, I skipped that one, sorry. So you can sign up for emails to candidates that would represent you. I know that this seems like a lot of emails, but I probably get one every other week from most of my candidates, and I don't read them all, honestly. If I'm like looking for specific things that I'm concerned about, or if I'm wondering if Representative Renetta Alston, how she may feel about drinking water, I can look through her newsletter and see if she's ever mentioned it. And then you can follow them on social media, on Facebook and Instagram, and tag them in content that you want them to know about. Maybe they'll read it, maybe they won't, but they'll see a headline. And so these are just regular people that ran for offices. They have other jobs. So tag them in content that you want them to be educated on. And then communicate. Send them emails, send them letters, and ask questions about your concerns. Okay, great. I wanted to leave plenty of time for discussion, but one thing I will also send, so I'll send a follow-up email to everyone that's registered with some links and resources and specific bill language that I mentioned earlier. But if this is something that you just really love and you want to be a policy wonk because it's amazing and you love it, here are some resources that I use. So there's a podcast that is really wonky. It's called Do Politics Better. And it is North Carolina General Assembly. And the hosts bring on different representatives every episode. And they talk about specific concerns that they may have. That has also been an amazing tool for me to figure out what the representatives care about and how to talk to them and build relationships. Representative Riddell is a great example. We were on very opposite sides of the argument for the Regulatory Reform Act. He was a sponsor of that bill. But when I came in to talk to him about it, I could be very personal about it. I could say, hey, I heard your interview on Do Politics Better, and it was really great for me to hear about you and your wife, Polly, and their family. And so you have to remember, again, these are just people. So build relationships with them, because if they know who you are, when you send that email and ask them to vote in a specific way, or ask them or tell them why an issue matters to you, that's going to leave a lasting impression. So build relationships. Do Politics Better is a great way to really get a better sense of who these people are. And also the North Carolina Board of Elections, that'll give you all the resources you need for who will be on your ballot and where to vote.